was shot with a couple more zeros at the end than my first film, which was $900. Head Trauma's budget was self-financed by me through private equity, raising it through different people. Made the film for $126,000, $70,000 to get the movie in the can. And when we went to make it, I became very interested. The thing that we did was the movie was released on. I released it. It went to the LA Film Festival, and then I released it in 17 screens myself theatrically. The way that I did that was I didn't have any money for publicity or advertising, so I put together a theatrical release that had me travel with the film, and I would go to various colleges and universities, and they would pay for me to speak. But then I used social networks as a way to kind of organize people to help me promote the screenings. So in different places where I went, fans that I had actually would go out and hang up flyers. They would help bring people to see the film itself, and that was very successful. Right after that, the movie was released on DVD. I struck a deal with a small label. I ran my own label for a bit, and we sold a lot of copies of my last film, and I didn't want to get caught in all the logistics of what that took. So I worked with somebody else to do that, and we struck a really interesting deal that was a $1 gross deal, which meant that every time something sold, I would see money right off the top. So I averaged about $6.50 to $7 per unit that was sold, came directly back to me, and I didn't have to deal with manufacturing, I didn't have to deal with any of the returns, I didn't have to deal with any of the promotion. So that actually worked out really well. Now, when we finished that, I was sitting and I was thinking, I'd like to take the movie back out again. And so we created these really kind of interesting remixes of the film. And what that basically meant was I set up live experiences around the movie, and we did that at universities, museums. Now, what was interesting about that is it actually made more money than the theatrical release of the film, because we were able to charge more money for the ticket prices. We were able to get what's known as a minimum guarantee. So they would give us money based on us coming there. And then we were able to sell all kinds of merchandise and whatnot. So the way that we structured the release of that particular side was, for instance, we did one in New York at the Museum of the Moving Image. And when people would come to the theater, we wrote software that rang all the payphones up and down the block. So as they walked to the theater, they could pick up a phone and they would hear all this fragmentation of some conversation. They weren't sure really what it meant, but it was very much in line with the idea of the narrative of the story. The protagonist of the film, Head Trauma, comes back home after 20 years to settle his grandmother's estate. He finds it inhabited by squatters and decides he's going to try to save it. As he goes to save it, he falls and strikes his head and starts to have all these recurring nightmares. So his nightmares start to cross over into his reality. So we thought that by bringing those payphones and having these weird conversations as somebody made their way to the theater, would put them kind of in the same headspace as the character. Now, when they came around the corner, there was a street preacher that we put on, basically on the street. And he was handing out these little comics, which were actually identical to the site that we built. But when somebody took the comics and opened them up and held them up to the light, there were all these ciphers and clues and riddles within their pages. And so they would take that. Some people didn't even know that it was related to the film. Other people just wandered and thought he was some crazy street preacher on the corner. But then when they came into the movie, we rescored the movie live with DJs and musicians. Characters would emerge from the audience and scare people, because it is a psychological horror. And then we wrote software that would allow people to interact with the movie. And what that means is, while they would sit in the audience, the characters would actually call them, and and there'd be a whole other storyline that was pushed to them while they were in the theater. So they would receive phone calls from the characters, they would receive emails from the characters, they would receive SMS messages from the characters. And then afterwards, this is where I think it's really cool, the movie would follow them home. Because once they called in and they opted into the experience, they would take that little comic that they had gotten from the street preacher, which in an identical fashion, in the film, the main protagonist finds a comic in a phone booth. They would take that home and they would start flipping through it, and on the back it said, "Do you want to play a game?" And it gave them the site, it gave them the address to the site. So when they would come to the website, we would know they were there, and we would call their phone. So the nemesis from the movie would actually be on the line. Now, this was done with sound design. It was done so it was built so it wasn't us on the phone talking to all these different people. It was literally the character. So the character would start asking these probing questions. Do you feel guilty? And based upon what people said through their phone, it would launch video, launch audio on screen. So all of a sudden, we start moving them through this experience. At a certain point, we said to them, "Tell us something about yourself that nobody knows." So they would say it into the phone, and whatever they said into the phone, we would loop it back over their computer speakers, right? So all of a sudden, they start hearing their voice over their own computer, and of course, they're all freaked out, and so they go, and then we built this fake little exit box. So they're clicking on it, trying to shut it off, and we know that they do that, and so we deliver a message through the phone that says, "Where do you think you're going? We're not finished yet." At which point, we then drop them into conversations with everybody else that was experiencing the same thing. So all of a sudden, they'd be dropped into a conference call with like 90 other people who are totally freaked out. And then sometimes we put actors into those types of things. And so we were very interested, and it was incredibly successful. I had to turn it off because it was so successful. So I used those sites, and I went out to the community, and I said, "Look, I need to raise $3,000, and I need to do it as quickly as possible." Well, within 2.5 days, we raised $4,000 from the community, because they came out and there was a value there. And the reason I bring this up is a lot of what helps you find that audience and how you can reach them is being clear about what the value to them is. What we did for 3.5 years by taking and making all these events for free, we built up this huge audience that loves what we do. So we're very clear and consistent about how we communicate with them. So being consistent is very valuable. And then we're very clear about what the value proposition is. Because to me, that's pretty amazing that I basically would go out and say, "Hey, guys, I need this, can you help?" And then within like less than 72 hours or whatever it was, we'd raise more than I even asked for. In fact, we're still raising money for it. So I think that's just a testament. So part of it's just understanding the value. So to recap, it's going to where the audience are, thinking about strategic partnerships with other people, like that kind of pebble in water kind of analogy, being consistent with what you say.